Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast, episode 203, brought to you by Osseo Gear. Don, this was the weekend of the ATA show, and both of us were extremely happy not to have to go this year. It kind of stinks not to catch up with some friends, but we do that other times through the year. You and I were luckily working on deer properties and walking, and that's going to be the topic of today's show, is what we can do when we're out walking properties. But we also got a few announcements of new events and a lot of questions that are really good this week. But I want to start out with just following up with what you ended up getting into this week, and let's talk a little bit about that before winter scouting.
Yeah, so I was consulting again this week. I did a couple here in Illinois, and then I went to Missouri. I actually went right through St. Louis while the ATA show was going on in St. Louis, and wasn't even tempted to stop. My schedule is just jam-packed full this winter. And in fact, it's probably jam-packed full until about the 1st of May. But, I had a lot of people reach out to me to ask me if I was at the show as they were there, was going to visit, but and had some folks from Michigan stop by today on their way home from the ATA show. So I hope everybody had a good show, but I'll tell you what, I'm just about deer showed out at 60 years old. If I never see another one, I'll be just fine. But I definitely understand the attraction there for a lot of folks.
Yeah, seeing what's new is fun. We kind of have a different opinion sometimes of the ATA organization and what they're about, but we understand, we get it. We don't want to make it sound like we're too critical about everything, but the people that it's almost, I think we give a little bit of shout out right now to the people who live that trade show circuit for their job and their career. Man, is it a grind. You've done it for a lot of years. I've had to do it with multiple industries for work. Trade shows are exhausting, absolutely exhausting.
Yeah, I mean, people don't, unless you're involved on the, the end of the vendor,
exhibitor side.
Yeah, you just don't understand. I mean, you start months in advance. You've got to you got to reserve your booth, and you got to then get a booth ready and design the booth. And the day before the show, or 2 days, maybe even 2 days, depending on where the show is, you drive to the show, you set up everything in your booth, then you stand on concrete for 3 or 4 days till your back and your legs and your feet are just killing you. And then you get to tear it all down. It's a mad rush as every exhibitor in the whole building is tearing their booth down, trying to be the first one out the door so they can hit the road and go home. Just chaos. And then you go, and if you're on a regular circuit, you do the same thing a week or two later, and on and on and on. And I just don't miss it at all. I do miss the people. I got to say, I met a lot of great people at trade shows, and I miss seeing that, but I do not miss the exhibiting at these shows.
Don and I, at this point in our careers, have it down to a science, and because and the other thing is our dealer network at Real World, we kind of want them to be the ones to have the booth at the trade show, and when we go to a trade show, we want to support them, help with the booth, answer questions or what have you, but because we want that relationship, that local relationship with your local dealer to be, that connection. But we have it kind of down to a science. Like when we go into the Shipshewana show, we'll have one box with a banner, clip it on, show up the morning of, and then roll out and not really have to pack anything up. So we've gotten a little bit more efficient with our trade shows that we do go to this year, or these days, don't we?
We do, and in fact, Shipshewana, we're not even going to have a booth. We've got a distributor right there as well as a local dealer. They're going to handle everything for Real World, and I'm not sure where I'm going to be in between appearances. At the we got the live podcast Thursday night, and then we got the Legends roundtable on Friday night, and during the day I'm probably just going to be wandering around like everybody else and visiting with people. So
we have enough partners. We have enough partners from the podcast that are going to have booths there. We'll probably be spending most of our time rotating around at those, whether it's Osseo or Brenton Firearms or Jay Gingrich's Tree Farm Gingrich Tree Farm is going to be there, and I think a couple others. So we'll probably spend most of our time there. I know Lester's Feet is going to have a booth, and there'll be board members in it. But let's get back to talking a little bit about consulting. I was actually helping some new friends out on a property in Indiana today. Has there been anything, Don, that's really just been obscure or odd that you found so far this year?
Nothing jumps out at me, really. I mean,
yeah,
I just am amazed at the good people I meet. I say it all the time, but then I have another week where I meet another bunch of great people, and it's always at the forefront of my mind because there's always new people, and they always just treat me so well.
I saw a video that Bobby Worthington posted this week on your channel about taking a minute and stopping and looking at creation and the history. Mm-hmm. He was talking about this humongous tree and stopping just to admire it. I think that comes a little bit with age. I think if we were all honest, the older we get, the more we appreciate that kind of stuff. But today I was on this property and we were on the side-by-side coming around. Thank goodness. It was real cold this morning, so thank goodness these fellers had a 2-row Polaris Ranger with heat and air. And we had the heat cranking inside. That makes it a whole lot easier for us. But it was, of course, real steep hill country in southeast Indiana, and dug into a bank with rocks piled up like a retaining wall was this flat area. And they stopped, and the legend has it is that the original owners of this property were moonshiners, and they had these stills hid back in the woods that they, made moonshine on. And that's just part of something that I love, going and walking the woods and figuring out and hearing some of those old history. Man, sometimes you just wonder if these woods can talk. You see one of these old, wooden tree stands that was probably from the 70s and 80s, and the stories of deer shot possibly or seen out of those. I think that kind of stuff is really cool when we're out.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to run into on these properties. I mean, I've seen it all. You may see a tombstone out in the middle of nowhere, a single tombstone, or, an old vehicle, and you wonder how in the world did that old Dodge get back here in the middle of this woods and have a tree growing, out the hood, and a big tree growing out the hood. So, it's been there for decades, and it just makes you wonder and scratch your head about the people and the events that were there way before you.
Yep. Well, I don't want to waste much more time with small talk. We're going to take Osseo break, come back, and talk about what everybody needs to be doing this time of the year. Now that deer season's over and you're going out walking your property, you're getting your projects in line. But before we do that, let's run through just a couple screens about speaking engagements and events, because I know people get sometimes frustrated with us taking time out of the podcast, but quite honestly, this keeps us from answering a bunch of private messages and emails and questions. So let's talk real quick about a couple of these things. We'll take the Osseo break and come back about what you're supposed to be doing this time of year on your farm.
Yeah, for those people that are watching this on YouTube, you'll see a long list of places Terry and I are going to be this spring, or this winter and spring, and I'm not going to go through them all, but the ones coming up here in the very near future, I am going to hit. So on the 15th, which is that Monday?
That's Terry? Monday night.
Yep. Monday night, Terry's going to be speaking at his home church in Dry Ridge, Kentucky, the Sherman Church of Christ. You've got questions, you can call 859-428-1661. There's no charge there if I read your post on social media right, but they do want to have an idea for food, right? So
yes, sir.
You could call them RSVP so they can have an idea on food. And then next Saturday, January 20th, I'm going to be in Lake Butler, Florida. First ever seminar I've done in Florida, but we have a real world dealer down there. I'm going to be at their event. This is going to be an evening event with a meal. So I'm going to give a seminar. They're going to have a catered meal brought in, some really good food as I understand it. And then after the meal, I'm going to take questions from the audience. If you got any questions about that one, you need to call 386-496-2266. And then February 2nd, I'm going to be in Iowa, Hopkinton, Iowa. There's two different real-world dealers are going together to put on this event. Be a seminar that evening. I believe there's food as well. Not sure on the food on that one, but I know there's going to be food there, but I don't know if this is a benefit supper or what it is. But if you're interested in that one, you can call 563-608-1579.
Yep. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see every week we'll kind of take some off the top and go down, but I'm really excited about this one that I'm doing. We've kind of talked a little bit about the idea that I've had about talking a little bit about the complexity of creation and talking about whitetail specifically, but the simplicity of salvation. So I hope people are going to come out and listen to that. While we got the slides up here, let's go to about our dealer summit for Real World.
Yeah, I've had several people reach out to me about this, and that's why I wanted to have a slide on this podcast. But March 4th and 5th in Arthur, Illinois, we are going to have a dealer summit for all the Real World dealers. Got a lot going on. We got Dr. Bronson Strickland's going to come in with a seminar the first evening. After Bronson is done with his seminar, Terry and I are going to do a Chasing Giants podcast, and I'm guessing Bronson will be up there, and we'll talk with him on this podcast. But the audience will ask the questions, and it's something special. One of our dealers is making bingo cards of phrases that Terry and I often say, like "tee it up" or "perspective." And garbage. I'm sure that'll be on there. So the folks attending that dealer event, they'll be playing bingo during the podcast, and we haven't decided what the prize is for the winner yet, but we'll come up with something. And then the next day we'll talk about the new products we've got and just some education for our dealers. And we really just want to use this opportunity to show appreciation for our dealers and all that they've done for us. And one thing I'll throw out there is we've had a lot of dealer interest in the last couple of months. And this, if you're a brand new dealer, you're just as welcome as someone that's been with us for 15 years. So if you've ever thought about becoming a dealer for Real World, this would be a great opportunity to show up and pick your first order up at this event. So hope to see a lot of you there. Remote master classes. So I've got 2 remote master classes this spring. One is in Spencerville, Indiana on March 23rd, and the other one is in New Richmond, Wisconsin on April 6th. And these classes have always sold out in the past, so if you're interested, you need to get signed up here fairly quick. You can just go to my website, HigginsOutdoors.com, for more info. There's a page on these classes that'll give you plenty of details, or you can call 217-273-2825 and sign up for those. And finally, Whitetail Management Summits. We've got 2 distributors. We got Extreme Custom Food Plots in Wisconsin, and we've got Eastern Outdoors out on the East Coast. And each of these distributors are putting on a Whitetail Management Summit with multiple speakers and a good meal. This is these events are on a Saturday. February 9th and 10th, which is Friday night and Saturday, is the one at Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin. The real nice Kalahari Resort is where this is going to be held, so you can come in the day before, stay that night at this resort. The next day, Dr. Bronson Strickland and myself will be speaking, and I think there's a couple more speakers lined up as well. You can pick up Real World products, and I'm sure there'll be other products there as well at that event. You can call. Trying to find my notes here.
I took the slide off too quick for you.
Yeah,
there you go.
Did.
I'll put it back. I'll put it back up.
The phone number for that one in Wisconsin is 920-255-6955. 6388. And then we're going to do one in Greenwood, Delaware, of all places. My first time ever talking in Delaware on March 9th with Eastern Outdoors, and that number is 720-648-0067. Very similar to the one in Wisconsin. There'll be multiple speakers, a lunch meal, and opportunity to get product right there at those events.
All right, sounds great. Hey, you're gonna get a smile on your face, so that everybody knows. Osseo has this kind of thing where if people tag Osseo in their successful hunting pictures, Osseo picks a picture every week and sends it to us to use on the podcast. And this is going to make you smile a little bit. I got the email from the marketing team at Osseo and said, hey, this is the one we're going to share this week, and check it out who it is.
Oh yeah,
I'll let you take it from here. This puts a smile on both of our faces.
Yeah, our buddy Kyle Harmon from Team Radical, a buck he shot. That was a late season buck, wasn't it?
Yep.
Did he just recently shoot that?
Yep.
Yeah. So great photo. As Kyle always takes great photos, but a nice old buck. You can tell this buck's been around the block a time or two. A real warrior. But congrats, Kyle.
Yeah, Kyle was texting us a picture of it that night, and Kyle just has a way of closing the deal late in the year, and he uses harvest salad better than anybody that I know for late season hunting, and he just has deer upon deer pile into these. And you can go back and watch the Team Radical YouTube channel about how many late season bucks he's been able to harvest. I know of just even a couple that he's carried the rack into ATA or shown us in January because he had just shot it like a week or two before. So I thought it just brought a smile on my face when I opened up the email when the marketing guy at Osseo sends us a picture of one of our best friends and obviously marketing partners at Real World. But Kyle's been close to us for many, many years, and I was glad that he got to be showcased by Osseo. That's pretty cool.
I remember when Team Radical was just a dream of Kyle's, and he's ran with that dream and done fantastic. And the reason for his late season success, it's no secret, he has the food, and he knows he's going to have plenty of deer in the late season, and he's got them figured out and patterned on his property, and he just drops the hammer time after time.
All right, so let's transition here to this late season scouting. So the season is over in most states. I don't know of many that are still there, but the season's over. We've all been sitting in tree stands, whether we were successful or not. Some of us might have a list on our notepad on our iPhone of projects that we want to do, like trimming trees and making shooting lanes, or maybe adjusting a tree stand from one location to another. Don, when you finish up a season and you're walking a property, whether it's a new property like you just bought or it's a client's property, what is your game plan this time of year? What are you looking for? What are some pieces of advice that our listeners can do that, we're trying to line stuff up of projects. What are we looking for? What are we doing?
Well, if it's a property that I've personally hunted before, my own property, for example, I'm reflecting back on the season that just ended and what could I have possibly done to make that season more successful. And in terms of, habitat projects, tree stand placement, maybe even something that I could have done different in my hunting approach. And if it's a habitat project, well, when do I need to do it? If it's more food, a new food plot, something like that, obviously it's going to be something that I'm going to address in the spring, but maybe I need to do TSI work, hang a new stand. This is a good time of the year. A lot of times I'm hanging stands as soon as season goes out for the next season. If I find a new spot and I didn't want to get in there before season was over and bump deer. Now, I'm not going to go out with this brutal cold that we've got this week because I've got these deer, piled in on my food, and I want them staying there. I don't want to put undue stress on them, so I'll wait a little bit and not go out immediately. But, I can do a lot just from my computer. I can scan a lot of times I will pull up and save a image from either Onyx or Google Earth. Most of the time I'm using Onyx because it just shows so much more information. You got the contour lines, you got property lines and all that. And then I'm marking things on that image that I saved where it needs to happen at. I'll drop a pin. Onyx lets you drop different colored pins, and you can code them with different images. Maybe an image of a tree stand, for example, if that's where I want a tree stand, or maybe an image of an apple if I want to plant a fruit tree at a certain location or whatever. So I'm laying out a plan of what I want to get done before next season, and a lot of times I'll use that Onyx image to do that.
So as we're putting our list together, priority wise, you just mentioned that obviously food takes place a little bit later, but now is our tree work and our forestry work for the most part. It's a whole little bit easier if the ground's frozen. We can get back in with equipment and work if we need to do that. I think people miss trimming shooting lanes at this time of year, as over the next 2 months, is one of the most vital things to do. Now, obviously in the spring we get grow back, but what about a guy who's setting a tree stand and he had a buck come by at 55 yards in the woods? This would be a time to, like you said, reflect back. How can I go in and drop a tree or put up a piece of hog panel or something to push that deer over and route that? That's the kind of stuff right now we're out doing strategy, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'll go back to what I was saying about my Onyx image, and I've got all these different pins dropped on the property, and you can take notes. You can click on the pin and you can take notes of what you're doing at that location. And then as I complete those projects, I delete that pin. And then, as spring goes on, we get into summer, I've got less and less pins or projects on my property. But yeah, you can drop a tree and you can push a deer 25, 30 yards closer to your stand if you need to, or put up a small stretch of fence to push them closer. Just a whole, the list is only it can be as long as your imagination. All kinds of things you can do to improve stand sites.
Our list usually gets long. It's just what we have time to really implement. And sometimes, what are some ideas if somebody's walking across their property and say they want to improve bedding? That was the thing that I was helping the guys with today on the property I was on. They have what I call as a pass-through farm. They get pictures of deer going through, but nothing ever stays. So they need to get bedding on their property. What are things, whether it's in the woods or maybe contrasted, the woods or maybe open area like out in Illinois, that we can look for on where to put our bedding and how to do it?
Well, we got to always consider access. We always got to consider, where our food is at, if we can move that food. If that food has got to be at one location, basically because of terrain or whatever. We don't want to have those deer bedded where we got to walk right through them to get to our stands. So there's a lot to consider, but you can create bedding cover in a hurry with switchgrass and miscanthus. And something I'm going to throw out, it just kind of come to me as I mentioned switchgrass. Guys, if you want real world switchgrass, it's going to be limited this year. I can just about guarantee you we're going to sell out. And if you want some, you better get it ordered in a hurry. Miscanthus is unlimited. We'll have we won't sell out of miscanthus, but you still need to get your order in fairly early. But what I really like and have been doing in recent years is combining miscanthus and switchgrass in the same planting, and make some great cover in a hurry. If it's wooded cover, the key to wooded cover is there's just one thing, that's getting sunlight to the ground. If the canopy is shaded the ground, you're not going to have good thick cover. The more sunlight you can get down to the ground, the better your ground cover is going to be. And all that requires is a chainsaw. Dropping, girdling trees. I'm not a big fan of hinge cutting in most cases. That can be somewhat effective, but you still got a live tree when you hinge cut. It's shading the ground, although it's putting cover on the ground at the same time. So I'm not saying it doesn't have its place. I'm just not a huge fan of that.
We had a conversation today on the property, and we got just a little skiff of snow today, and it was cold. It was below freezing all morning. And as we're walking in this hill country, really steep, I actually had a tough time just because of my back still giving me some problems, but really, really steep country. And we're trying to figure out on these hillsides, where to drop trees and do a heavy TSI cut. And I told the guys to look up, and they had one whole hillside that we could see from the bottom that still had snow on it. And even though it was below freezing, this whole hillside was all melted off. And I said, that's a great visual of where we need to really focus our TSI work if we're going to do it, because that sunny area that's melting the snow is also where we can, appeal to those whitetail and other wildlife, being warmer during the day. So it's a little thing that I don't know if it's scientifically proven, but it's a little thing that I've tried to do in hill country and going in and identifying, areas that I want to TSI to create bedding, as long as it's where we're not having to have access on the farm. That's the big thing. If everyone would oversimplify their plan, and we did it today, we're going to put perimeter access around it, even in hill country, and leave the core to the deer. Find ways to do that, and then able to hunt. It's a game changer when you can have bedding on your property.
I tell my clients almost every day that I'm meeting with a client, I'm telling them, if you want to kill big deer consistently, you got to hunt them on the very property where they bed. If they're bedded one property over from your property, your odds of killing that deer are 10% what they are if he's on your property. Yep. And once you get him on your property bedded there, then you got to keep him there. And that's the second trick that I got to get through some clients' heads, is that once you get him there, you can't be too aggressive where you bump him off. If you keep him there day after day after day, some point during the course of a season, you're going to get your crack at him. But you run in and bump him off, it's over. You're done. So you got to get him there and play conservative once you get him there.
So I think if you're following your season and you want to go out and look and work at your property, I still think that overall we don't want to just keep going in month after month right now. I think you put a strategic plan together and prioritize it. And if you're going to TSI it, try to find a time to just go in and wreck it and get out. Don't stretch that project over, the whole first quarter. I know time is limited, but I think we still have to be cognizant of how much that we're in there, try to get in and out. Yes, you're going to put intrusion on, but we got plenty of time for it to settle back down and be ready. Bedding right now is adjusting our bedding, and tree work is the priority for what I try to do this time of year. I need the ground to freeze really, really hard, and I have a monster oak tree that's down over the hill on my property right now, and I wasn't able to get it out last year. I want to actually mill it to build my wife a new kitchen table with wood from the family farm. And I need the ground to freeze to get this thing out with a logging winch, and we didn't have it last year. But projects like that, you need to be able to go in and do this time of year and have them prioritized so that when planting season comes, we're completely out of the cover. You're just out in the food plots at that point.
Right. And, there's just a long list of things a guy can be doing this time of year, not putting pressure on the property. But I will say this, if you've got a big major project, we always want to do it as quick as we can. If we can go in and do it in a day or a weekend, that's ideal. But let's say you got a project that's taken several days and you got a full-time job, so all you got's weekends off, and you go to church on Sunday, so basically you got Saturday and maybe Sunday afternoons. I still think you're better off to go in and get it all done in one winter, so that in future years, then you're totally backed out. And you just want to condense it as much as you can. If you have to do it over the course of an entire winter, do that instead of dragging it out for 3 or 4 years. Yep. But you kind of limit that pressure when you can.
So I got one more thing that is an easy thing to do, even in bad weather, that people could do right now. And everybody, I shouldn't say everybody. That's the wrong word. I apologize. Many people try to take a shortcut with this, and now's the time to do it, and that is buy your material for rope scrapes and get them made and get them hung in the tree out in the yard right now. Don, how many times do we get a question in August and September and say, is there a way I can soak this in baking soda water or drag behind the four-wheeler up and down a gravel road or whatever to get this chemical smell out of it? Folks, now is the time. Get on Amazon, go to Tractor Supply, get your rope. Talk a little bit about why that's so important right now.
Well, you just need to get all the scent. That rope is just fantastic for holding scent, deep in those fibers. It takes months to get that scent out of there. And not only do we get those questions in August and September about how do I get the smell out of this new rope, then we start getting the questions in October and November, why is deer not hitting my rope? Well, when did you hang it? Well, I hung it a week ago. Yeah, well, no wonder.
This is the absolute perfect time. So we got sub-zero temperatures rolling in this week, and you're sitting on the couch. Go ahead and start cutting 4, 5, 6 foot lengths of your 3/4 to 1.5 inch, rope, and fraying the ends of it and putting your hog ring or your zip tie or whatever you're using, and go ahead and build those the lengths. And then when you're out walking the dog, just go out and throw it over a limb in your backyard and just start letting this thing weather so that it has all the scent out by the time we put it out this spring. That now is the time you have to, if you want a rope scrape, now's the time you have to do this project.
That's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, Terry, because this is when you get your rope scrapes ready and you get them in the woods before it greens up. It can be when you go out on your shed antler hunts in late February and through March. Take the ropes with you and put them up then, but don't wait until summer.
Do you think it's all right if it has a chemical smell to go ahead and hang it on the farm out in the woods, or do you put it in the tree for a couple months and then take it out in March?
Well, I try to age mine in the yard sometimes I'll have rope hanging in my tree in the yard for years. And when when I find a place where I need one, I just go out there and I cut me off what I need, and the rope's already weathered. So
I like to put mine out in the tree in the backyard at least for a couple months and then take them out a little bit closer to spring. I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer, but I don't like for deer to come up to it and stick their nose on it and it still smell like chemicals. So, but now's the time to put it out in the air. Thanks for taking the time. We get so many questions about what can I be doing this year. People are kind of getting stir crazy in January because they just came out of hunting season and Christmas, and there's really not a lot to do. Folks, there's a lot you can do on your property right now before shed season and you start walking. So encourage you to find some of that timber or some of that habitat projects and go ahead and do it. We got 6 questions, Don, and I want to spend a lot of time on it. We're already a half hour in. Do you got anything else you want to talk about before we dive into questions?
I think I do have a topic or two, but I think I can work them in the questions.
How about a quick clarification about NutriCrave corn so everybody knows? Are you going to work that in now or later?
I'll work it in later, but we got a question or two about corn.
All right. So I'm going to put up our first question about from our listeners. Again, reminder, if you get a question used on the podcast, you will get a free Chasing Giants shirt sent in the mail. New one's coming out soon. We need to probably change the design here on the back a little bit, but if you want that, why don't you read off real quick? We got a bunch of new listeners. If you don't have access to internet and can go to ChasingGiants.com or HigginsOutdoors.com to the podcast page to submit your question, you can also write a letter to the Real World office. Remind everybody of that real quick, Don.
Yeah, you can submit your question in writing. Just send it to Real World Wildlife Products, P.O. Box 55, Arthur, Illinois, zip code 61911, and we can get them that way as well. So 2 options so everybody.
Just a reminder, Miss Carrie or Miss Janice is reading your question, so make sure you realize that.
Okay, our first submitted question this week comes from Dustin Ward He's from Liston, Indiana. Says, Don and Terry, thinking late season food. If you had 10 acres totally surrounded by hundreds of acres of timber, what are you planning for maximum drawing power? All NutriCrave corn, all Real World soybeans, half beans, half corn. I guess my real question is, what food source do you think has the most drawing power late season? I also have a 1 acre clover field that has seen its final season, 7+ years old, and needs replanted. What method would you go about to replace the clover? Would spray it, till it, no-till it, or plant it in something totally different? A green plot works perfect for this location, so I'd like to see it stay a green field. Also, I see lots of people on the internet planting and using alfalfa. How would you compare clover to alfalfa, and what might work better in my little 1 acre plot? Last question, why doesn't Real World sell alfalfa or advertise it? Thank you for sharing your deer hunting knowledge. Well, Dustin, your first question is regarding if I had a big 10 acre plot in an area, just a heavily wooded area with very little ag, and I wanted a late season food source. I think nothing beats soybeans. If you would plant it in corn, there's a good chance by the time late season rolled around, it would be gone. From what I've seen on my place, the deer just destroy my corn until it's gone. And the soybeans kind of they eat it throughout the fall, but a lot of it is still there in the late season. If I had to pick one thing for late season hunting, it's soybeans, hands down.
Can I get you to clarify something about that before you move on?
Yep.
So is that because deer hit the soybeans hard in the summer while they're green, but after they kind of dry down, they're going to other green or corn and don't really come back to beans as much until everything else is gone and it's really cold? Why do you think, because obviously they hit them in the spring, why are deer transitioning like that?
Well, I think it's what they crave at that time of year. In the fall, they're putting on fat for the winter, and they need high carbohydrates. And that's when the acorns, when the acorns start falling, they really start hitting the acorns because they're high in carbohydrates. Corn is really high in carbohydrates. The beans are high in protein and fat. So when it gets cold, that oil that's in the soybean gives them energy that they burn, to stay warm. Now, the carbohydrates are important too, but they really crave that the soybean. The other thing is that late in the year, there's hardly any high protein food sources. The soybeans are going to be higher in protein than anything they can find, and they want a balanced diet. So they're going to eat those soybeans throughout the fall to get the protein, but they've got so many other good food sources available that they just eat enough, it seems, to balance their diet, to get that overall protein of their diet where it needs to be. You get into the winter, and I'm telling you, this weather we're going to have this coming week, I don't know about you there in Kentucky, Terry, but it's supposed to be the next about 4 days, the highs are supposed to be in single digits, below zero at night. And I'm telling you, the deer are going to be all over the soybeans this coming week. And they're going to be in the corn too, but the soybeans are going to see more pressure than they've seen all season. Yep. So that's why the soybeans are the big one there. Okay. You talk about his next question was about his clover plot that was 7 years old. It's time to replant it. Well, you don't have to replant it. You can keep a clover plot going forever if you just every other year in early spring frost seed some more seed on there. And typically, we're seeding clover at about 10 pounds per acre. And if you go half that rate and you just cut it in half and do 5 pounds per acre every other spring, you can keep a clover plot going basically forever. So I wouldn't tear that clover plot up. You said you need a green plot there. I would just go in this spring and I would frost seed more clover seed right on top of it. Now, the other thing you need to do is you need to mow that clover plot. That young clover that you frost seed is going to come up this spring, but you're also going to get some weeds coming up because I'm guessing it's kind of bare, and that's why you're saying it needs converted to something else. Just get that clover seed frost seeded in, and then when that vegetation in that plot starts getting 8-10 inches high, go in there and mow it, and you will get a good lush stand of clover doing that. And then every other year, just continue, and you'll keep a clover stand going, basically forever. The last question was about alfalfa, comparing alfalfa and clover. Well, alfalfa, there's nothing more nutrient dense than alfalfa. It's a fantastic crop for deer. The issue with it is, first of all, it has a high fertility requirement. And the reason that we don't push it is because most food plotters are not going to do what it takes to have a good alfalfa stand. You're going to have to do soil tests. You're going to have to amend your soil with whatever it needs. It's going to use a lot of lime. And the other thing is the alfalfa, once it gets the first frost in the fall, it loses a lot of its attraction. Where clover will continue to be attractive right on into the winter. I mean, I've seen deer dig through the snow to get at green clover. That alfalfa is going to turn brown and not be near as palatable later in the year. And especially on a small plot, what you're talking with your clover, alfalfa is not going to be able to take the pressure that clover will. And the other thing is, you can't go back in with alfalfa and frost seed more. If you don't get a good stand with your alfalfa, you got to start over. And the reason for it is a mature alfalfa plant, as those leaves fall off the plant and hit the soil, they actually are toxic to a new alfalfa plant. So you go out and you plant your alfalfa, whatever stand you got is the best stand you're going to have. And then you're slowly going to lose alfalfa plants over a period of years, and it's going to fill in with weeds and grasses and whatever. Another thing about alfalfa is it needs to be cut and baled about every 28 days. And I don't think that just mowing it is a good option, just mowing it and letting that alfalfa lay on the ground. It actually needs to be baled off of the field for, maximum results. And most food plotters are just not, equipped to do that. With both equipment and time. So, alfalfa is fantastic. Whitetails love it, but there's good reasons that we don't sell it or push it, and that's because we want you to have a successful plot. It's not about just making a seed sale and hoping you have good luck. We want you to have the best luck possible, and we're doing some of that with the products that we offer.
Yep. We both have alfalfa on our farms, and we have access to alfalfa that we could sell, but it's not something that we're going to market for those reasons. Talk a little bit about, we mentioned that alfalfa has to be baled and raked and baled. I've made the mistake of thinking that alfalfa was too thin. I wasn't going to rake it and bale it. I was just going to leave it lay. And then I go over and the plants are dead underneath of it, even when I thought it was really thin. Mm-hmm. Put a contrast to that to clover. Obviously, we recommend mowing your clover. When somebody's looking out at a clover field, when do we decide whether we're going to mow it or not? Is it 28 days, or do we look for another indicator?
No, I look for the bloom. When that plant is full of blooms, most clovers for deer are white clovers or ladino clovers. So they're going to get the white blooms on them. We do have a red clover in our mix as well, a very, very good and attractive red clover. But when that clover plant starts getting full of blooms, you want to cut it before it totally goes to seed. Terry, this week I was on a property, it was actually here in Illinois, and the neighbor had a clover plot right on the property line, and we was walking along the edge of the neighbor's clover plot, and that clover plot had received no maintenance whatsoever. So amongst this clover, there was all these dead weeds and such. And if that clover plot had been mowed a couple times, and you could tell that it hadn't been mowed one single time. I mean, we had dead weeds that were 3 and 4 feet tall in that plot. If that clover plot would have been maintained, you would have had a lot better stand of clover without the weeds. And I think we've discussed that numerous times on this podcast. Do I mow my clover or not? I absolutely am a big proponent of mowing that clover from about May through the 1st of September. I'll do my last mowing in early September, but I'm probably mowing mine about once a month throughout the summer.
You know, genetically, a plant like clover, its purpose in life is to grow and bloom and create seed for another clover plant. And I think back to all of the guys that can kind of snicker at this that grew up on tobacco farms in either Kentucky or North Carolina. When we had to work in the tobacco fields, when the tobacco plant would get a bloom on it, we would have to go in and top it. So we'd have to walk through the field and break the top out of every tobacco plant, because if we didn't, the leaves would be all spindly on the tobacco plant and it would blow this huge big seed head up. But if we went through and we broke that tobacco plant seed head off before it went out and bloomed, all of a sudden these leaves would fill out and just be huge, because that plant was then, all that energy was, instead of going to produce seed, was going into those leaves. And I think it's the same for clover. If we let it get too far, that plant is now going to be in reproduction mode versus growth mode. And if we go in and cut the top of that, we're going to have lush stand of clover come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a plant's goal is to reproduce. And it goes through that life cycle, and once it has reproduced and made seed, then that clover or that plant either dies or it goes into an almost dormant stage. It loses a lot of nutrient content even. And when you cut that clover plant before that bloom has a chance to turn to seed, you reset that cycle. And so then it goes back to growing, more leaf matter, and it'll again put on blooms. And then again, you cut it and set it back, and you keep that life cycle from finishing. And you keep that plant in a state where its nutrient content is higher than if you go ahead and let it bloom.
Yeah, and tissue analysis proves that we can keep that much higher if we're keeping that young, tender growth happening. So, Great questions. I think we answered all of them from Dustin that he had in there, didn't you?
Yeah, he had 2 or 3 in there anyway. But
the only other thing I would say about people trying to go clover or legumes, I think I've been guilty of this in the past. You can comment on it if you want, of just going and buying clethodim and trying to fix it with chemicals. And I think that if we have a good mowing program, we can really reduce the amount of chemicals that we're putting on the plot.
Yeah, especially with clover. I very seldom spray my clover at all. I do 2 things. I mow it, and then I frost seed more seed in. And sometimes, until I get a really good stand of clover, I may frost seed every year on a new stand for 2 or 3 years. Then once I get a really good stand, I back off to about every other year. But the frost seeding more seed and continual mowing will do way better for your clover plot than any chemical will.
Yeah, if it gets away from you and you need to get it cut back, you can spray clethodim on it. We sell it, but we're telling you, we'd rather not you buy it. We'd rather you mow your clover plot for a better. I guess we should sell our product more. That's on our website, but mowing's going to get you better along.
The one situation where the clethodim comes in is when you get grasses. Where mowing, if it's a cool season grass, not a weed grass, that grass gets established and it just spreads, and mowing does not kill it. Mowing will kill broadleaf weeds. But if you got a grass issue in your clover, that's where the clethodim comes in.
Yep. Great point. All right, we're going to go to the second question. I'll put it up on the screen, and Don can read it here.
Okay, the next one comes from Jordan Schmitz from Barnveld, Wisconsin. He says, "Hey, Don. First off, thank you for the time and work you put into the podcast. You've got me beyond hooked. The same year I bought my 40 with a house, I started listening to your podcast. The last 3 years, I've transformed this 40-acre cattle pasture into a deer wildlife magnet, following along with you and Terry, getting ideas for improvements. Year 1, I got 5 buck pictures total. Year 2, 105 buck pictures total. This year, year 3, I got 395 buck pictures total. I have implemented many of your tactics along this journey, and next year will be my first full year of no human intrusion due to the amount of work put into getting this property set up. I've got over 3,000 spruce, apple, pear, persimmon, and nut trees planted for the future, 3 acres of plots, a wide variety, watering holes, and ropes. I currently have a stud of a buck that is only showing up on my property after the season is over when we have a bunch of snow. I currently feel like I cannot do anything else physically to the property to make this buck stick around. Do you have any suggestions for me to get this sucker on my property during season? I know you don't have much information, but would greatly appreciate it, as I've been letting deer go for about 10 years now, and I'm ready to drop the hammer. I look forward to continuing the journey with Chasing Giants. Well, Jordan, a couple of things. First of all, I get questions all the time from deer hunters listening to the podcast, clients, whatever, and they throw out a situation that there's absolutely no good answer for. There just isn't, you know. I got a buck, he goes to my neighbor's property right next door, but I never get him on my property. Well, there's only so much you can do, and if you can't get him to come over, he's just not going to do it. You know, individual bucks have different home ranges, and I've found it extremely difficult to affect a mature buck's home range. If your property is not part of his home range, it just isn't. You can do everything you possibly can, and it's just not. The other thing is there's some bucks that shift their ranges. You know, they'll have a spring-summer range, and they'll shift and they'll spend the fall and winter elsewhere. And I found it impossible to get a buck to shift that pattern as well. So maybe he summers on your place, and then he shifts for the fall for no apparent reason. You can't figure it out. I just have had very little success in shifting that pattern or changing that pattern with an individual buck. The one thing that I'll note, you've got a new property, you've just done a bunch of work to it, you planted trees, those trees have got to be less than 3 years old. It takes a while for a property to mature. And, you know, you can go in there and do everything that needs to be done to a property, but it takes a while for the deer to recognize all that you've done. Even on creating a sanctuary, and you're talk about you're moving to, this will be the first year with no human intrusion. It's going to take a while for the local deer herd to really key in on what you're doing. Give it time. Your property, I promise you, it's going to get better. It sounds like you're doing everything right. It's going to get better as the years go by, but there's just some things like trying to get this buck onto your property that there's just not an answer for.
You don't plant that many trees and do that much work for one buck. You're laying a foundation for your kids and your grandkids to be able to take advantage of this property as a hunting sanctuary. And we had this talk today on the farm I was on today to change the, you know, we might be able to funnel deer differently that might be using the property and kind of shift them over to where we can hunt them. But to say that a deer's going to bachelor on my farm, or to say that he's going to come here during the rut, changing that behavior, we just can't count on it. We're doing this for a long-term play. And I think that our consultants that go all in, you know, our slogan for Real World this year, are putting all of these resources in. It just has to be more of a long-term play that we're looking at to improve the habitat.
Yeah, I can remember when I just started on my place, and I would sit there in my stand. I would think, in 5 years, this place is going to be good. Next year, I'd sit there and I'd think, in 5 years, this place is going to be good. Next year, I'd sit there, in 5 years, this place is going to be good. And one day, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, man, this place is pretty good right now. And that's probably what's going to happen to you. You're going to sit there and you're going to look at those young trees coming on, and you're going to think, 5 years, I'm going to have a good property. And it's always going to be 5 years out, and one day you're going to it's going to hit you. My place is pretty good right now.
Yeah. All right, next question here.
All right, this one comes from Eric Billington from Randolph, Wisconsin. He says, Dear Don and Terry, longtime listener of the podcast, I've never missed an episode. My question is regarding the drought. You've talked about bucks not putting inches on because of it, which I have also seen here in Wisconsin. I'm also seeing bucks dropping earlier than normal. Could the drought have an effect on when they drop, just as it does their overall growth? Thanks for considering my question. Prayers for both of your families, Eric. It's very possible, Eric. You know, an early antler drop is caused by stress, some sort of stress. It can be an injury. It can be weather. I remember, I think I mentioned several times on this podcast that I remember a winter back probably 15 years ago where we had an ice storm, and that ice just accumulated on everything, and it stayed for about a week. I mean, a stalk of a soybean plant would be as big around as a shovel handle with all the ice on it. And the ice stayed. It's not like the next day the sun came out and melted. It stayed for a good solid week or so the deer had nothing to eat but ice. And I'm telling you, every buck shed his antlers in about a week, 10-day period during that ice storm. And that's the one extreme case I can remember with weather. I've seen a lot of injured bucks shed early. I mean, even as early as, early December. I don't think I've personally seen one shed in November, but I've seen a couple of instances where people have showed me trail camera photos of shed bucks in November. But it's some kind of stress. And I know there's land managers that believe that they like to see their bucks carrying their antlers late, into March and even early April, because that's a sign that deer has not been stressed. And stress can have a negative impact on antler growth the next year. So definitely the drought could have affected some of these bucks. I know I've got a buck on my place that's already shed, and he doesn't appear to be injured whatsoever. I also have noticed a lot of broken racks this year, and I don't know if the drought, I'm sure it affected the nutrient content of the plants these deer were eating. How that translated into the antler makeup, I have no idea, but I've seen a lot of broken racks and heard of a lot of other people seeing the same thing this year. So I'm guessing it very well could have affected some bucks shedding early.
Wonder if there's any we need to ask Bronson this next time we see him, if there's any research that shows in a drought year is calcium deficiency shown in blood work or in tissue analysis of plants where your bones might be a little bit more brittle in the rack. It'd be an interesting piece of research is for when plants are dry through a drought season.
We'll have to ask him that if we can remember it when he's
somebody that's coming, one of our Real World dealers that's listening. Make sure you make a note of that and ask that during the live podcast when Bronson's up there.
Yeah, the odds of me remembering that question is really close to zero. So
isn't it funny when we get emails about stuff about people saying something about what we said, and I'm like, I don't remember what I said on the last episode, much less. So we got folks. We got way too much stuff going on in our head to remember what we talk about.
Well, what's also interesting is we say something, and one guy will send us a message chewing us out for saying it and thinking that we're being inappropriate, and somebody else sends us one and compliments us on the same comment. So sometimes we can't win.
Yeah, it's all right. We appreciate everybody listening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right,
we'll do our best.
Number 4. This is from Michael, I think.
Michael Carlson from Woodstock, Georgia. He says, hello, Don and Terry. I want to start by saying thank you for all the information and laughs that you two bring every week to a newer hunter like me. My friend and I have recently gained permission to 600 acres, and it seems as though all the bucks are younger and with poor antler growth, and there are 3 or 4 does to go with every buck. What would you do in this situation? Thank you both for your time. God bless you and your families. Well, Michael, if there's not, I don't hunt a property unless I know there's a shooter buck on it. If I got permission for 600 acres, and the first thing I'd be doing is I'd be loading that place up with trail cameras. I'd be trying to get an accurate inventory of every buck that utilizes that 600 acres. And if there was no shooter buck on there, I would start getting stand sites ready, right away. There's going to be some obvious stand locations that you don't even need any history on that property to find if you're an experienced deer hunter. So those stands, I'd be getting them ready. It's all about preparing for that opportunity when it happens. Don't wait for a mature buck to show up and then go out and start hanging cameras everywhere and start hanging tree stands everywhere. Get the property ready to roll, and when that giant does finally show up, go in there and get him killed. I wouldn't put a whole lot of hunting pressure on it, and here's why. You got a lot of young bucks there, and you're going to educate those young bucks to your stand locations. Even with minimal hunting opportunity, bucks catch on to you a whole lot quicker than you realize, and you can burn out a bunch of good stand locations before you ever have a true shooter on that property. So I would just flood that property with trail cameras. I'd hang stands in the obvious places that are going to be good, and then I would wait for that giant to show up.
Yep, I agree. The one thing I compliment you on that I never have the patience to do is you've taken me on farms before and showed me stand sites that are already ready, and I'm like, you got a deer in here? He goes, nope, but there might be one day. Just because you know that it's it's a testament to some of the places that you find to hunt where you could go and not see one single deer, but it could be the next 200 walk through there. It has that potential of no human intrusion and pressure around it. That's the kind of stuff that you're looking for, and I don't have that far of a vision, I guess, to say let's go get a whole piece of property or a whole thicket or a whole draw ready. And maybe one day it happens, but if it does, you're ready.
I would hate to guess how many tree stands I've hung over the years that never got hunted one single time. Not one hunt from them. I can think of one area right now that I got, and it's 2 different properties that are fairly close together, that I've got 3 tree stands there that actually Wes Delks went in and helped me hang them. Probably we did it on Super Bowl Sunday, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and haven't hunted any of them. It's a good spot for a giant. It's just that the giant hadn't showed up yet.
You've mentioned on the podcast before how many trail cameras you run. Do you have any idea how many tree stands you have out?
No idea whatsoever.
I mean, it's got to be in triple digits, isn't it?
Well, if it's not, it's close. I've got lots and lots of stands out there and I'm telling you, I've got a lot that have never been hunted.
Yeah.
Literally, after I hang them, and people are going to say, well, do you go in and do you check the chains every year and blah, blah, blah? No, you know what I do? I put on a heavy chain. I don't use straps. It's a chain, and that chain wraps totally around the tree and the stand. It gets a bolt run through it. And there's no way it's going to break that chain. It may grow into the tree.
Cables on the stand platforms are replaced with chain.
Yep.
We use a lot of ladder stands that don't have cloth or mesh seats in it, and those are chained. So when you're putting stuff up like that, you know, I realize people do need to be careful. It's dangerous climbing up in a tree that's been out, that's straps and rusted cables and bolts, but you've got it down to a science. Actually, when we used to have a tree stand sponsor, they actually asked us not to talk about that because of the liability of people leaving tree stands out. But you're putting extra effort into those stands to make sure that nothing's going to give way years and years after you hang them.
And like you mentioned, I've gone to a lot of ladder stands that are 100% metal, no cloth seat. And when I put them up, I'll even take self-tapping screws, stainless steel so the screw doesn't rust, and my DeWalt drill, and I'll screw those ladder sections together so they don't pull apart as the tree grows or whatever. Yeah, I customize those stands for, you know,
being able to be out year after year, right?
Right, yeah.
And I know a lot of people just say go mobile hunting, but I think people have known by us that we just like a lot of stands, not one mobile pack. So,
yep.
All right. Question number 5 from Jacob is going to be on your screen in just a second.
Jacob Kufer from California, Missouri says, Don, with habitat improvement season upon us, I have a question that pertains to wooded cover. In my timber, I have little to no undergrowth within it. I have started thinning out trees to let sunlight to the ground to combat this issue. One thing I've noticed while working on this is that 90% or more of the trees are hickory, sycamore, and hackberry. There is a very small percentage of oaks, if any, within the heart of the woods. My question is, would you supplement oaks or other beneficial trees back into the wooded cover once I get exposure to the forest floor, or would you just let natural regeneration take place? I was thinking, other than the forbs that will grow to thicken the forest floor, I'm not really adding much long-term value to the woods. Also, I believe once acorns drop every year, I lose several deer to neighboring properties because my property has a very small acorn crop. Thanks. Well, anybody that's going to be at one of these speaking engagements I've got this year, and I just did one last week in Fredericksburg, Ohio, where I showed the slide presentation. I show a woodlot on my property just as you described, that had basically soft maples, some hackberry, locust, elm, things like that. Provided very minimal benefit to the deer. And I show a series of 3 slides. One was the open timber before I touched it. The second slide was I had a logger come in and I told him to cut every single tree that he wanted in that woodlot. I told him, you cannot possibly make me mad because you cut too many trees. I said, if I come back here and every tree is gone, you're not going to make me mad. You cut them all, anything you want. And then when he got done, I went in there with a friend of mine with chainsaws, and we spent a good couple days either dropping or girdling the trees that were left because there was not a good tree species in there. Then I came back, and I in the spring, amongst them fallen trees, I brought in some potted oak trees, and I climbed, and my help, we climbed in these fallen treetops, and we planted these potted oaks, and then put the plastic tube shelters on each one of them. This was several years ago. Today, those oak trees are big enough that I could put a tree stand in some of them. That changed that open, worthless woodlot into a nice bedding thicket overnight. And you guys that were at the Fredericksburg event last week, you're going to remember this series of slides. In one season, I went from a worthless open woodlot with junk trees to a absolute fantastic bedding area. And as that woodlot regenerated, it regenerated with a bunch of really nice oak trees. And today it's still fantastic bedding cover, but it's got some nice oak trees coming up within those fallen treetops. And if it's a timber that you're planning to own for a while, I strongly suggest you get some oak trees, some potted oaks, get some nice ones, and go in there. You can't just go in there with little bare root seedlings. The vegetation that's going to come back is going to come back so quick, it'll just overpower or shade out and choke out a bare root seedling. But with a potted tree, it's especially a bigger potted tree with a 3 or 5 gallon pot that's got a good root system. You plant those in there, you protect it with a tube shelter so deer don't rub them and eat them, and you should have a really good stand of trees as well as cover for bedding, in the future.
But you got to plant those trees. They're not going to miraculously come from a bunch of garbage trees that were there. If you don't, you're going to have garbage trees sprout coming back. You're going to have to go in and implement some new species, though.
Yeah, and something else I'm going to throw out is that I can walk into a timber, and I see it all the time, really, and I can tell if it was an old cattle pasture. He mentions a lot of hickories and such and hackberries in his submission here. A cow will eat a young oak seedling, but they won't touch a hickory. They won't touch a walnut. They won't touch hackberries, but they will just devour the young oaks. And I see a lot of woods. I walk in and there's hickories, especially hickories everywhere. That is a sure sign that timber was once a cattle pasture. So really doesn't have much to do with this question, but I just thought it was interesting. I can throw it out there. If you've got a timber that's a bunch of hickories, more than likely that was once a cattle pasture.
Interesting. All right, last question of the night.
So this one comes from Brent Fry from Highland, Illinois. Says, Don and Terry, I recently learned about a big favor that Don did for my dad, brother, and I. Just wanted to say thank you again to Don. His integrity and selflessness are not unappreciated. My question is about hunting and growing a corn plot. How do you both manage the corn for hunting? Do you knock it down in a way that directs deer movement? I think that you could use the edge of the knockdown corn to funnel deer past your stands. Would you prefer anhydrous ammonia or broadcasting urea and working it into the plot? Any advice on this would be appreciated. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and experiences to help us flatten the learning curve. This is the question where I was talking about earlier, Terry, where I wanted to bring up a couple of things about our NutriCrave corn. So, last week when I was in Fredericksburg, there is a seed company there in that area called Merit Seed. Very good seed company. I'm not bashing Merit Seed in any way whatsoever. But I had someone contact me this week saying that they were told at that event by someone in the audience they was visiting with that Merit Seed sells the very same corn as our NutriCrave. Folks, that absolutely is not true. It cannot be true. We are working specifically with a corn breeder. We have exclusive rights to NutriCrave corn. Nobody else is selling NutriCrave corn.
Seed.
The seed corn. Anybody that's telling you they are is misleading you. Just leave it at that. So I'm sure that did not come from Merit Seed. Again, a very reputable seed company in that area, but somebody is spreading the idea that you can go to Merit Seed and get the same corn as NutriCrave. You absolutely cannot. The other thing I want to throw out there is that it's come to our attention that there are people selling NutriCrave or deer corn, or calling NutriCrave deer corn, that's not in our bag. When we sell someone NutriCrave seed, they can harvest it, they can sell it, do whatever they want with it, but they cannot use the name NutriCrave. And the reason for that is the name NutriCrave we have protected. And when someone is selling that a product they are calling NutriCrave, we have no control over what's in that bag. They could be putting, some triple stack GMO corn that's yielding 500 bushels an acre in their sack and calling it NutriCrave, and we have no control over that. So anyone that's selling NutriCrave deer corn that is not in the real world bag, that is not allowed, and we're going to have to crack down on it. I'm just throwing that out as a fair warning. That's just what our legal advisor, our attorney, has told us, that we need to crack down on that because of liability issues. They're using our trademark name, NutriCrave. We got to cut down on that. You can grow NutriCrave and you can sell it. You can call it Farmer Brown's deer corn. You can call it anything you want. You just can't call it NutriCrave corn. So if you know anybody,
we sell seed corn. People can grow it. People can sell that as shell corn or ear corn, but we do not release the secret sauce and how we cross-pollinate it with a proprietary variety that has higher oil content in it and higher protein. So what's in a NutriCrave deer corn bag, nobody else knows how we're doing that, and that's kept proprietary. That's not a standard seed corn. That is a cross-pollinated of two non-GMOs. So don't be fooled. Somebody can buy our seed corn and sell it, but it's not the same thing. Just be aware of that. So let's get back to Brent's question about how to take care of corn and hydrous and fertilizer. I think you got a couple very key talking points here in planning.
Yeah, I just want to throw out, Terry, also that we've had some people contact us saying that people are selling NutriCrave deer corn and it's not in our bag. Folks, we do not want to get an attorney after people. Please just stop doing it if you're doing it, so we don't have to go down that road. As far as Brent's question, so you can direct deer past your stand in a corn plot by mowing. The deer prefer, from what I've seen, they prefer to feed in that area where the corn's knocked down. I don't know if they if it's because they feel safer in the open rather than, in that cover of the corn, it's probably because they just as soon eat it off the ground as, off of the stalk. What I typically do is I mow a little bit of mine at a time. I've been waiting on this cold spell for a good month or more because I didn't want to get out there in my corn plot in the mud and mud things up as I'm mowing this corn. But with frozen ground, I can get out there and I'm not pushing ears into the mud as I run over them. Instead, I'm breaking them up. And so this week, I'm going to be going and mowing what's left of my corn plots down.
Same with me.
That's
actually, I'm going to pick a little bit, but most of mine is going to be mowed.
Yeah. That's a good way to direct deer in a corn plot in front of your blind or your stand. As far as the nitrogen, you asked if I prefer anhydrous ammonia or urea. Well, actually, what I use, the process I go through when planting my corn to fertilize it, corn needs a lot of nitrogen. Urea is basically granular nitrogen, 4600. So when I get ready to work my corn, my corn plots are the only plots I work. Everything I do is no-till except for my corn. And I work that ground because I just think I get a whole lot better yield from my corn plants when it's in work ground. That loose soil allows that corn plant to really establish a good root system. So what I'll do is right before I'm getting ready to work that field or disc that field, I will go out and I will broadcast urea on the ground. And I'll use approximately 100 to 150 pounds per acre of urea. And then I disc that into the soil, work the soil, plant the corn, and as soon as I'm done planting, I take my planter right to the shed and I immediately hook up to my sprayer. I got a 3-point sprayer on the back of the tractor, 30-foot booms, and instead of putting water in that sprayer, I use liquid nitrogen. There's a liquid 28, and I think there's a 32% as well. I get that from my local farm co-op. I just take one of those plastic totes, that you can unload with forks on a skid loader or tractor. I'll take one of them to my local ag fertilizer place. I'll have them fill that up with the liquid nitrogen or fill it half full, whatever, and I'll put that in my sprayer. And then I will mix in my residual herbicide. Resicor is the one I've been using. I will put that in on top of that liquid nitrogen. I've not had any problems with reaction, bad reaction where it wants to gel up or anything like that with the Resicor. There's other chemicals. You probably want to test that before you go doing it in your entire sprayer. I'll put that in there, and then I'll take the water hose, and then I'll mix it up. I'll stick that in there, and I'll get it mixed up really good. And then I go back to the field, the plot. I just planted in corn. It's bare dirt. Keep this in mind. It's bare dirt, and I will apply that nitrogen and the residual herbicide at the same time on top of that. And I drive pretty slow. My goal is I want to get about 25 gallons of that per acre. So I've got my tractor speed calibrated with my sprayer and the pressure on the sprayer where I know how fast to go and what pressure I got to be at, the RPMs on my tractor to get 25 gallons to the acre. And I will apply that liquid nitrogen on top with the residual herbicide. And when I'm done, I am done with my corn for the entire season. I don't ever come back and have to spray that corn. I don't ever have to come back and apply more nitrogen. I've got it all right there the day I plant. I usually do all this in one day. I put the urea down, I disc it in, I plant, come back, and I spray more nitrogen and the residual herbicide, and I'm done for the entire year. Never have to touch it again.
Yep. All right, well, great question, Brent. We get a lot of questions on that. Maybe we can get Steve Shields to make us a little YouTube short with that segment on it that we can use for a quick answer instead of answering everybody by email. We can just play that one. I think that's a great scenario. But, yeah, if you're going to be trying a different herbicide, test that with that liquid nitrogen, because sometimes those herbicides will gel up or they'll turn chalky, and then just plug your sprayer up. So make sure you do a little science project with that before you mix a whole 150 gallon or whatever of it. So.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Steve Shields, I want to thank him for that new introduction that we got to play at the beginning of the podcast. He's such a talented guy. He made us a new intro that you all probably saw on this episode. It's the first time we've ever used it. And then obviously you got a lot of new kind of test, I would say, going on with your Instagram and social media platforms, doing a lot more reel videos. Hope that everybody's following Don on his social media. It seems that a lot of analytics show that engagement and getting messages across is so much more powerful with short videos. So we're trying to adapt and put that stuff out there as much as we can for you. But again, appreciate everybody's support. You got anything else before we close out of here? We're running like at an hour and 20 minutes now.
Yeah, no, I just hope to see everyone at Florida, down at all you Southern boys in Florida next week. And
are you wearing shorts?
There will not be any shorts on this guy. I promise you that. And all those other events that I threw out there, those whitetail management summits, if you want to get in on them, be sure and call those numbers. And anyway, hope to see you all at some event this winter on the road.
All right. Sounds good. Take care, everyone.
God bless. See you next week.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, BioFarm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.